Welcome to Rob's Country. We're going to be doing an update on our 5-acre block of lucerne and what's needed there as far as soil tests and that sort of thing is concerned. We're also going to be talking law, and Linda Merchants is coming in towards the end of the program to talk about federated farmers. But launching off lameness and foot abscesses.
Yeah, so we're seeing a bit of a run of lameness, especially in cattle at the moment. I think with the wet weather, a lot of mud around, the hooves getting softened up a bit, they're a bit more prone to trauma, and we're seeing quite a few sore feet coming through.
With dairy cows have probably stopped being pushed along alleyways and things now, so it's more
probably
natural.
In the dairy side of things, they're getting away without too many issues. Hopefully, they're drying off and not pushing cows through so much. But certainly on the smaller blocks, cattle that are being brought onto properties, they seem to be getting a bit of trauma to their hooves and abscesses as a result.
Let's start with sheep.
Sheep, so you get your scald, so just inflammation in between the hooves usually, and then you can get your foot rot as well.
So the scald is a wee bit like sitting in the bath for too long.
Yeah, you get that,
softened,
wrinkled, softened, macerated tissue, and then that's prone to getting bacterial infections and into it.
Yep.
Yeah,
and foot rot still around? Definitely
still around. We see cases of it. It often is localised to certain properties, and you can get some really, really nasty separation of the hoof wall from the hooves and really sore animals.
It's great that people like Romney and Corriedale are getting genetics which are foot rot resistant.
Exactly. It's fantastic to be able to start to select for sheep that are resistant to these diseases and breed them out.
So prevention and cure for foot rot.
Yes, so foot rot, obviously treating the active cases is first thing, identifying those and treating them. You're needing to actually pare away and trim away a lot of the affected hoof wall where it's separated away from that hoof there, and that allows the topical treatments to actually get in and treat the bacteria that's there. Utilising foot baths, things like zinc sulphate, sometimes dilute formalin foot baths as well.
And trimming them.
Trimming them, keeping that foot form without the overgrowth, so as it's still not pulling away so much, getting rid of all that affected tissue and topically getting the stuff in there. Some of them also need antibiotic injections to get on top of it. And then if you're looking at actually preventing it, you can actually look at trying to clear it from the property as well with a identification, treat and cull program and running 2 mobs, so you've got a clean mob and a dirty mob too.
And do you put any stock that you buy through a bath or foot bath on the way into the property?
Certainly can be a good idea.
Or isolate them?
Isolate them, monitor them, and you can foot bath them as well to try and prevent issues. This time of year, trucking stock, when the feet are soft, they can be more prone to trauma as well, and so you can actually have some foot abscesses or the start of foot rot or something cropping up early.
So speaking of abscesses in cattle.
Yeah, so oftentimes it'll be a bit of trauma for a start. You get some muck up into that hoof there and forms a nasty abscess under a lot of pressure. They're incredibly sore. We see quite a swollen lower leg as well often. Ideally you get in there and you actually trim the hoof back. You can open up that abscess and get it draining. Sometimes we don't have the facilities available to do that, and we'll start with antibiotics straight away.
Yeah. So that's a vet thing, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Get us out, we'll have a good look, make sure there's nothing else going on. Similar sort of lameness could be caused from musculoskeletal injuries, even abscesses. Sometimes they're barely putting that foot down, so it could present quite similar to a fracture as well. Yeah,
because you can tip a sheep up, but you can't tip a bovine up necessarily.
No, and without good yards and handling facilities, we're a bit limited on what we can do, unfortunately, with feet, but if we can get in there, we'll pick that foot up and we'll have a good look and trim it back.
Horses.
Horses, again, we saw a huge run of abscesses in horses just as this wet weather came in sort of April, May, I would say. And that hoof gets softened up again, they get a bit of trauma, and you get the bacteria getting in within the hoof. They're again really, really sore. They may be actually barely putting that foot down again. They will sometimes work their way up, burst out the top of the coronet or out the heel, but again, getting in, digging that abscess out and getting it draining gives them a lot of relief.
It doesn't sound nice, does it?
It can be pretty smelly.
Yeah, exactly. We're having dinner at the moment, we do apologise. Hoof care?
Hoof care, it's really important with a lot of these animals. They can get very overgrown toes. You've got cattle, sheep and goats, and certainly there's farmers out there that are selecting for good hoof conformation, and that's important to look at if you're buying stock into properties as well. If they are overgrown, it's trimming the toes back so they're even, so they're wearing evenly on the ground. And that's something that should be assessed anytime stock are in the yards, really, identifying any issues and dealing with them.
And very briefly, laminitis.
So it's June, and we've been treating laminitis in horses. It's pretty unusual.
Because that's a spring thing.
Exactly. And I'm sure it's just related to these odd warm days that we're having. We're getting a short, rapid burst of growth. The grass is coming through really high in sugars. And most of these ponies aren't overweight. Their weight's actually well managed. They've been turned out onto pasture for the winter, and boom, they've got laminitis.
In June. Don't believe it.
Exactly.
Thank you very much indeed. Still more to come for you here on Rob's Country.
Our new companion package is a personalised service for those that need extra help and support. A cost-effective solution for someone who needs more than just a taxi driver. Our drivers are handpicked from our experienced team and specialise in providing the right support and companionship. Home safe every time with Blue Star Taxis.
Hi, I'm Caitlin, the naturopath here at Staywell Pharmacy. Working with the pharmacist, I use herbal and nutritional medicine to recommend natural alternatives for your health. This can be to counteract any side effects of your medication, general health advice, or natural options for you and your family. I'm also available for consultations. So come in and see us at Staywell Pharmacy, 27 Shand Road, Hornby. Staywell Pharmacy, live well, stay well.
Blackwells has a proud history presenting leading vehicle brands, extensive backup and service for a total one-stop driving experience. Holden, Mazda and HSV new and used vehicle sales, servicing, parts, paint and panel, Isuzu truck sales and service, all together in one convenient location. More selection, more value, more quality and more reasons to make Blackwells your #1 choice. Visit Blackwells today, corner Waterloo Racecourse Road, Sockburn, or online at blackwells.co.nz.
My son's helped me greatly with my independence now that I've got more mobility.
Mum, I've been looking into stand assist chairs from More Mobility. They recline back with a footrest, then when you want to get out of them, they stand you up. You can even sleep on them. More Mobility can bring one out for a free trial. There's even electric beds too. What do you think? For more range and more expert advice, see More Mobility, corner Clarence and Princess Streets off Blenheim Road.
What a difference more mobility makes.
Come in and meet the locals at the Bush Inn Centre. Whether it's to grab a coffee on the go or to catch up with a friend over lunch or dinner, the Bush Inn Centre is the perfect place. With our unique range of shops, you'll find everything you're looking for and more. Our friendly locals are always happy to help. We have plenty of parking at the Bush Inn Centre, making your shopping experience just a little bit easier. So come in, meet the locals and shop Bush Inn. You'll find us on the corner of Riccarton and Waimari Roads.
Hi, I'm Steve and welcome to Carpet Kingdom. At Carpet Kingdom we stock a massive range of carpets and we're also the largest vinyl stockist in the South Island. And not only do we have an excellent range in store, but you can purchase our stock online. We offer free measure and quotes, we have our own installation team, we ship nationwide, so come on down and see us at Carpet Kingdom, 312 Wilsons Road in Waltham, just off Brougham Street, or visit us online at carpetkingdom.co.nz.
Well, we're monitoring a 5-acre block of what is going to become Lucerne, just out of Kerwee. We've basically talked to the people from Seed Force, and they've said we're going to put a load of oats through there initially, and then that will be harvested, and it'll be sprayed off, and then we put the Lucerne in Christchurch show weekend. But before we did any of that, we needed to find out what was happening below the pasture.
Well, first of all, Rob, we need to take a soil test, and 2 phases to that. First of all, take a soil test, and also we'll just have a sort of a dig with a spade in the ground just to see how friable and how deep the actual roots for lucerne will be able to go. Whereas lucerne has a very, very long taproot, so the further it can get down, the more drought resistant and more nutrients that it can take up. So, in terms of soil testing, we'll go through with a 150mm probe, which generally with pasture tests we take a 75mm probe. With crops and especially lucerne we take a 150mm probe, which gives us the ability to take a deeper look at the soil nutrient levels as the lucerne root will be going down through that zone initially, just to make sure we've got the right nutrient balance for the lucerne.
So pH is one thing. What else are you looking for?
pH is probably the most important thing in terms of establishing lucerne, so we're looking at it essentially. But for lucerne, the most common deficiencies are phosphorus, sulphur, potassium, magnesium. In terms of trace elements, boron, and to a certain extent cobalt, we'll be having testing for to see what levels they are at, and then from that we'll then be able to get the right combination of nutrients going on. But this first stage will be to looking really at what the pH is, see what the calcium levels are, and then getting the, if required, getting the agricultural lime on as soon as possible so that it has time to incorporate it through the soil and through the winter so that it's ready to go when we get into sowing time.
We're going to be direct drilling and probably show weekend for the lucerne, so you're planning ahead with that in mind?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, if you get the sooner you get the agricultural lime on, the more time it's got actually to physically break down and become available in the soil and to start to shift that soil pH. Ideally with lucerne you're looking at a soil pH of around about between 6 and 6.5, probably more towards the top end of that. So it really depends on what the pH comes back for initially to say how much agricultural lime we'll put on for a start, but it does take time for physically for it to be broken down. It's not really broken down by weather, but more of the soil activity that'll break it in biology that'll break it through and release the calcium to shift the pH.
Bacteria or
microbes
in there.
Yep, microbes and worms and everything like that getting in there and actually physically breaking that lime down. So if we can get it on early, that means by the time we come to sowing time at show weekend, we should have the best possible start for the lucerne.
Now this is a 5-acre block. And you were saying that you might have to mix up a special brew. Is that okay?
Yeah, no problems at all. Once we know what the actual nutrients are required, we will then put together a specific mix for the block according to whether it's phosphate or potassium, whatever requirements it is. It will depend a bit on the end use of the lucerne in terms of if it's going to be grazed. You probably don't need as much high nutrient levels rather than when it's been cut and carried, because you are taking a lot of nutrient off when you do bale it and then sell it off the property. So you just need to make sure that you're keeping those nutrient levels up to replace any losses.
Well, that's what's going to happen. It's going to go into small bales for the horse market. So do we need to keep coming back and visiting?
It depends how many cuts we're going to get out of it each year. Ideally, it would probably look at doing maybe 1 or 2 applications of nutrient per year. Just really depends on the yields and how the season and how it's all going to come off. Being a dry land, that all really depends on what the weather does over the summer as to how successful or how much of a yield we get from it.
Well, actually, there's a wee secret that you didn't know, but there's K-line here as well.
Oh, right, okay. Well, you always throw out the curly ones. Yeah, well, if it's going to be irrigated, obviously, there's going to be a lot more crop taken, so we will, we will have to take that into consideration in terms of the yield that can be taken off it, or the tonnage of lucerne.
How often should we be soil testing once we're up and running with the lucerne?
I would recommend probably do a soil test this year, and then we do another one next year just to see where that calcium, that pH levels have got to and the nutrients going. And then probably after that you could back it off and probably do them every 2 or 3 years, just assessing the crop and see how well it's going, make sure there's no visual signs of any nutrient deficiencies in the leaves or in the yield, so that we can reassess it. But probably every 2 to 3 years on a regular basis. It's important to soil test at the same time of the year, so if we are going to soil test again, it would need to be done sort of June in 12 months and then the following June, etc.
Why?
It just keeps your consistency. Your nutrient levels vary according to how the season, because of the soil activity in the soil biology. Some elements are more available at certain times of the year and how the plant's grown, etc. So if you go into a paddock that's got 3,000 kgs of dry matter, well, you've actually got a lot of nutrient that's sitting up in the plant, so your levels will be different to if you went there in midwinter and it didn't have, and had 1,500 kgs of dry matter. So you're just trying to be consistent with what with your soil testing. Soil testing is it's not an absolute. It's a guide. You to get, no matter what you do, and you'll get variations of sort of anywhere between 10 to 20% between the soil sampling, the lab, and that just sort of determines where you put your levels after you've got the results.
Is there likely to be anything that's locked in there? I mean, you hear stories about irrigated land locking in certain elements or whatever. Well,
with lucerne is a pretty good plant that can actually look for nutrient and sort of source it out. So it will actually do a lot in terms of, because it's going so deep, you don't really find that there's a lot of available nutrient that it won't actually access, but most of you could get a bit of a tie up with your with some of your phosphates being locked up in the soil and not becoming available. So we will do a comprehensive soil test which will analyse the available phosphate and also if anything's locked up in there and the reserves of those nutrients as well.
And today's a Tuesday. When are we likely to get the results for Adrian?
I would hope that we'd have the results back by the end of next week. So by about Friday of next week, we should be able to have an answer on what those levels are.
And then you go into some sort of a little office and work out what the recipe for the cake is.
Our soil tests are analysed by Hill Laboratories in Hamilton. The results from that go to Dave McKee at Soiltech, who will come up with the recommendations as to what the mix should be and how and the levels of the nutrients to be applied. And then we come back with the answer.
And indeed, what is the answer?
Well, right, we have got the answers. Yes, they did come back in time and when they were supposed to. So it was as we possibly expected in terms of the pH and the lime requirements. So I'll just go through that first. That the pH has come back at 5.5.
It needed to be 6 something. Didn't it?
Ideally for lucerne, your minimum is 6, and you probably want to be more towards 6.5. So it is quite a long way off in terms of the actual calcium levels and the liming factor that we need to put into there. So, the answer for a start is to get on with some agricultural lime and to get that on as soon as we can, because that's going to give it time to break down by show weekend when the sowing time is. So
it's 5 acres or 2 something hectares you've got a rate?
We're looking at, it needs up to about 5 tonne per hectare of agricultural lime, which is a lot, and from our perspective, it's almost probably too much in one go in terms of you can start to, by putting so much calcium in one time, start to lock up some of the other elements such as magnesium.
Yeah, because we talked about, didn't we, about locking?
Yeah, that's right. So we may do it in two hits just to give it a slower lift rather than just giving it sort of the one big shock treatment. Although I think even with the 5 tonne, we probably will need to be putting on some more even after that next year. But we'll do a soil test again next June. Just
so if you're going to split it, you'll do one now?
Yes, yeah.
And we'll do what, one once?
Probably in the autumn we'll do another one then, and then after it's got a bit of an establishment going, and then just give it another hit of lime, so that we're just sort of bringing it in a controlled way rather than just dumping it all in one hit.
Mainland Minerals, you've got your little recipe book out.
Yes,
What else is going on?
Okay, so what else we found with this was the, for your viewers while they're familiar, if we had a sulphate-sulphur reading of 7.
Which should have been what?
It should be 10 plus, so it should be sitting anywhere between sort of 10 to 15, and so at 7 we'll be applying some sulphur as well. These will go on at sowing time, the other elements apart from the lime. So the lime will go in now.
Because the oats are up and running at the moment. So,
So we'll put the rest of the dressing on at around about probably just after it's either been drilled or just before it gets direct drilled, which tends to drag some of the fertiliser into the soil a little bit as well.
Because quite often the guys are using fertiliser as they're drilling, aren't they?
Yes, yeah. I mean, obviously it depends on the contractor whether he's got the ability to put it down the spout, as we call it, in the drill box, or whether we broadcast it on as a separate application. Yep. Probably the mix that we're doing, it's probably going to be more suited to a broadcast application. Okay. Because we're using some various products in there. So your sulphur is down a bit. We're putting some sulphur on. The phosphate levels, the Olsen P came in at 19. Ideally, probably wants to be about 25 for lucerne, so 20 to 25. The resin P, which is another measure of the phosphate, which is a little bit more stable than the Olsen P in terms of its reading, it's also shown that it's got a reading of 37 and wants to be around about 40 to 45 reading. So we do require some phosphate. So in our mix for going on in November, we've got so far sulphur and phosphate. Potassium is another, lucerne is a big drawer of potassium, and especially if we're going to be cutting and carrying it, as we talked about before, that we're going to be taking a lot of the actual potassium off the property. Yep. So we've got some potassium sulphate going into the mix as well. I'll give you the sort of the levels of that we're putting on. We're going to be putting on around about 20 kgs of phosphate in the form of a guano phosphate called Main Phos, which has got sulphur in it as well. We've also been adding a little bit of DAP into the mix as well. Okay, it's going to give it a good old boost. It is, yeah. It's, people poke out the word lucerne, DAP, why been putting on nitrogen when it's a legume? Even at establishment, a little bit of nitrogen doesn't hurt, just to give it that initial boost, just to get it going a little bit quicker. It's probably once it's established, you wouldn't be using any sort of nitrogen. Okay. So then the potassium, we're putting on potassium sulphate at 50 kgs per hectare, which will put on around about 20 units of potassium. And in addition to that, and what we found out with our soil testing, is that the boron levels are low, so we'll be adding in boron at 7 kgs per hectare, and also copper is low, with putting on 6 kgs of copper sulphate into the mix as well. Boron is an element that as you raise your pH, it becomes less available, so it's important that if you're going to be putting on that agricultural lime, to add some boron on, just to counteract the fact that even it is low in the soil now, it'll be getting less available because of the pH going up. Does that go in with the lime, or does it go in with the rest of the mix? It'll go in the rest of the mix in the November mix. So it'll just be lime initially? Yes, just lime initially, yep, and we'll put that on. If we can get that on within the next couple of weeks, that'll be an ideal timing. The thing that astounds me, is that the mix? Yeah, that's the mix, yep. So that's what astounds me, Dean, is that it grew grass like that, and everybody would think, everything was absolute tickety-boo, and now you've gone and taken the plugs out of it miles away. Yeah, I wouldn't say we're miles away, but we are probably in that pH, and I mean, obviously, grasses have a less requirement they're more tolerant for a lower pH, so you'll get grass growing at pH is right down to 5.3 sort of thing. It had a wee bit of clover in it too, which should have been able to legume it a wee bit. Yes, the clover will be fixing a bit of nitrogen with it as well, so that will be helping the pasture as long as well. So, but lucerne itself is a plant that just requires a high pH, so that's in the initial getting the. Thank you very much. We now know where we're heading with that. No problem. So basically we've got the oats, they are through. We're heading for a harvest time in November, show weekend for those of you who know when show weekend is. And he's gone and sorted the soil, which is great. After the break, we're talking with John Wally.
Yuck, look at all this moss and lichen. I'm not getting up there, not in these heels. Time to call Mossbuster.
Mossbuster is a no-bleach, non-abrasive, biodegradable solution that has over 35 years of proven results. You can buy Mossbuster online for less than half the cost of other well-known products, and can be yours for less than $1 a litre. You just spray it on and let Mother Nature do the rest, or Mossbuster can do it for you. Check out our website or call the Mossbuster crew for a free quote. Mossbuster, 0800 88 1000.
Christchurch has its very own enchanted utopia, the Hitching Post. Pop in and see for yourself. A magical assortment of handmade creations, custom-made candles and artwork. Choose from our huge range of water features, garden art and imported giftware. specialists in handcrafted metal artwork made in store. Nestled on 722 Marshlands Road, The Hitching Post, defining art our way.
Welcome to Caltex Redwood. We're a family-owned business proudly supporting our local community. We're open 24/7 for fuel and shop goods, and we have an amazing team of people ready to help you. Save at least 6 cents per litre using AA Smart Fuel cards. We also offer great value on our LPG bottle fills. We have a full workshop and Bridgestone Tyre Centre. Our mechanics and tyre technicians will get your car sorted. Caltex Redwood. We're just down from St Bede's on Main North Road. Caltex Redwood. What drives you?
One of the biggest challenges facing anybody is storage, or more to the point, a lack of it. That's where Russell and Rob come to the rescue. Their array of shelving and storage solutions is limitless. They can design and deliver exactly what you need, from shelves for the office, a workbench or storage for containers. These guys are one and only call you need to make. Shelfmart, shelving your concerns about storage.
Potholes. To some, a simple hole in the ground, causing no harm and no concern. But don't let that fool you. Potholes are dangerous. Did you know potholes have been linked to numerous nasty falls and flat tires? So if you have a pothole situation on your property, don't panic. Call the Pothole Repair Company. They'll fix your potholes in a jiffy. So next time you see a pothole on your driveway or in your car park, call the Pothole Repair Company.
Do you wear an earpiece or earmuffs? Do you have trouble hearing people or the TV? Do you have itchy ears? Then it's time to clear the ear. Their gentle micro-suction technique is not only safe and efficient, but it's also performed by fully qualified, trained, registered nurse. Call for an appointment or Clear the Ear can come to you. Need earplugs? We have swim, noise or aeroplane plugs and many more. No referrals necessary. Hear every moment with Clear the Ear. Phone 0800 Ear Clean.
Welcome back to Rob's Country. OCR.
OCR, well, you remember when I was last here in February? I said it's going to keep going up.
Yep.
And we're going to see rises over the next few months. Well, we've had 0.75% since then. I think
they
I was
did listen, didn't they?
Well, I was actually saying I wish they wouldn't, but nevertheless, that's what's happened. And so we saw 13th of March was the first, and then we've seen 2 since. There's some indication that maybe it's going to slow now. But nevertheless, that's 1.5% on borrowing costs, and we were talking about that in February too. And I think that's really what we're going to see going forward. We're going to see issues around borrowing costs continuing to rise to at least this time next year, and we're going to see this problem with currency, where we're hovering at something like just under 87 across the US, and the news out of the US is mixed, but it's still not to the point where we're going to see upwards pressure on the US dollar.
There'd be those who would say, John, that this putting the interest rates up, all it's going to do is give more profit to the Australian-owned banks.
And for people who are playing in asset speculation in the main centres, so it is this issue around the Reserve Bank has essentially come out and said that it sees the lift in the currency as helping them in their job. For the first time, it's actually admitted that it is seeing deflation in the what Graham Wheeler called negative inflation, which in my world is deflation. And so the traded sector gets deflated, and that means we get less for what we make, or less for what we grow, or less for what we sell.
It rose by any other name, isn't it?
Well, you know, we don't want to say deflation, that's a bad word, but negative inflation, maybe that's different, but it means the same to me.
Cutting straight to the chase, exporters, manufacturers come under your umbrella.
Yeah, and it's tough. It's tough, and it's getting tougher, and the longer the currency's at higher levels, the more difficult that world becomes. Whether it's Canterbury or outside Canterbury, if you're an exporter, you're facing these ongoing problems. We've seen it against the euro, we've seen it against the Australian dollar, we've seen it against the US dollar.
But surely we make all our money and our survival by exporting, so why wouldn't they actually say, well, let's make it easy for you guys?
That's the neoclassical economic standpoint. We do a whole bunch of policies, and we had Bill English talking to us a week ago, which a manufacturer from Ashburton said, but it's killing me. And Bill essentially says, yeah, well, these things happen. You know, it'll get better in a year or two. Yeah, but if I'm not breathing any longer, it's a bit of a problem. But nevertheless, that's the standard analysis, that essentially these things look after themselves in the medium term. It depends whether you can get through from now to that medium term.
So they're just looking at their books, as in the government's looking at
their
books?
Well, I mean, yeah, it is. I recently wrote a paper called Prosperity and Policy, which compares the performance of a number of countries around the world, the English-speaking world versus the German or the Swiss or the Scandinavian or the Korean or the Taiwanese world. And their worlds and the way they've run their economy over the past 30 years have performed much better than the English-speaking world. And the thing that surprised me in doing that research was that even the US has lost economic complexity over the past 30 years. And as we lose economic complexity, the economy performs less well. So that's a structural long-term concern rather than a medium or short-term concern.
With the interest rates going up, to me, they're opening the floodgates for overseas investment.
It does exactly that. I mean, that's the mechanism. The Reserve Bank saying, why would we interfere with the currency when we lift interest rates and the currency goes up? That helps us get inflation down. So when we're on a tightening bias, we're never really going to do anything about currency. We actually encourage and we actually appreciate a higher currency. And that's been explicit. Grant Spencer said so.
But all that goes back out. The profit doesn't stay here, it goes back.
Well, that again is that net international position, the difference between GDP and GNP. So it's how much we keep of what we make or how much we trade offshore back to the people who own equity and activity in New Zealand. And I guess that back to that Anglosphere world, the actual net investment position has gone really negative. And on my list of chosen countries, which were US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand and the UK, New Zealand's the worst in terms of that net international balance.
Not good.
Not good.
Exactly. How do we get out of this?
We get out of it, and there was some signal of this around monetary policy from Labour. In late April, Labour talked about manufacturing policy, and it also talked about monetary policy, among other things, but let's just focus on those. But in talking about monetary policy and charging the Reserve Bank with a responsibility to look at the current account balance as well as inflation. And so if we move and we fix inflation, but as a side effect, we make the external balance worse, then we need to start thinking about different policies. So it would be not so much interest rates, more around the macroprudential area. So you remember the sort of low LVR controls. That Reserve Bank that is more focused on the external balance would put a lot more weight onto those, the supply side of debt. So you can't borrow if you don't have the deposit, or you can't borrow if you don't have the income. In fact, the Bank of England, and I don't know when it stopped doing it, but I remember when I bought my first house in England, I knew exactly what they would lend me, whatever deposit I'd got, plus 2.5 times my income, and that was it. There was no other discussion. That's the maximum you could borrow. Well, if we have that sort of thing, then we start to limit asset speculation. We start to limit housing markets without having that impact on currencies that come with exchange rates, with interest rates.
So very, very briefly, why are we trying to get inflation down?
Because inflation's bad for all of us. Essentially, if the money's worth less, we don't, if you're a saver or if you have money to spend, you don't want your money to be worth less. So I don't want worthless, but worth less. Yeah. And that's the whole issue of asset appreciation. If the same house or the same farm is worth twice what it was 10 years ago, but it's only housing the same family and hasn't changed, and it's only earning the same money as it was 10 years ago, why is its value different?
As always, thank you very much indeed. You're an amazing amount of knowledge in that head. Now, the other thing we're going to talk about is Seals-Winslow. Basically, Seals-Winslow is what Cantabrians always thought was the Lucerne factory on the main road.
That's right, Rob. Yeah, many years ago it was just out of Ashburton, and that, obviously the little township of Winslow, which I found out not that long ago as well. But now Seals Winslow is the amalgamation of two businesses. Obviously that Winslow Lucerne plant and one in Morrinsville, which was Seals, another long-standing family business that Balance bought those two businesses together in 2011, and then middle of last year we actually bought the other 49% of that business, and it's now 100% owned by Balance Agri-Nutrients. And so we've taken Winslow and Seals, and as you can tell, we spent lots of money coming up with a new name, Seals Winslow.
So what's the philosophy? Because it's more than making sheep nuts for live sheep exports.
Yeah, it certainly is, and I know that was the history of the Winslow plant, and we still do that. But there's that's actually a huge growing part of the business at the moment, because there's so many heifers being sent over to China at the moment, and so we are still supplying a lot of those live export nuts. But it's predominantly dairy feed. We are what we call we're a specialist in ruminant compound pelletised nutrition. So we make pelletised feed to feed ruminant. Obviously, the predominant ruminant animal is the dairy cow, and being owned by Balance, a fertiliser company, it's not around taking grass out of the equation and then replacing it with compound feed. It's actually making sure that we've fully utilised that pasture, and then what can we do to top up the feed with our compound feed, and then how can we increase profitable production after that.
So that's why Balance got involved, obviously.
Yeah, certainly. And if you go back into the sort of Dairy NZ statistics, there's more money being spent by New Zealand dairy farmers on imported feed into their farm system there is on actual fertiliser. So that imported feed obviously includes maize, silage, all sorts of other feed that's there, not just our feed. But farmers are looking to increase their production, how they can do that profitably, and make sure that they're getting the most out of their land and their big investment that they've got now, because they're, as we all know, they're multi-million-dollar businesses. It's around increasing the profitability out of that.
Covered sheds and feed pads, obviously that's part of the equation. That's where we're heading.
I think that's a trend that's coming, but I don't think it's where I don't think it's going to be all there. But certainly there's more covered sheds going in there. You've got the herd home type things. You've got covered feed pads. You've got lots more people utilising palm kernel, maize silage. If we talk about some of the dry that we've been through the last couple of years, people are making sure that they've got much more supplementary feed to get through those seasons. How they actually feed it out, there's still a myriad of ways, but the statistics don't lie. In actual fact, I'll quote the numbers. There are now 68% of the New Zealand herds are in system 3, 4 and 5, which means they're strategically using some form of feed all the way through the year. If you go back to 11 years ago, there was only 38% of those farmers doing that. So that growth in the number of farmers putting effort into putting that feed in is why we're in the business.
Ties in as well, I suggest, because you're covering everything.
Yeah, dead right. So from a Balance perspective, we call it complete nutrient management. So we're looking at how we make, obviously we make our byline being creating the best soils on earth, and obviously those soils are there to grow pasture, to grow the forage crops. From that point on, it's then how do you actually manage the whole feed intake, and how can you make sure that you're getting that production. And then of course the next leg of the stool is effluent management, the technology and the information to make better decisions, and that's where our other business, Ag Hub, comes in as well.
So it's really sort of a consulting situation.
It is. It's looking at the whole picture. It's not just trying to sell one thing to a farmer, and we're certainly not there as a farmer-owned cooperative to sell them something they don't need. And if you look at it, it's called a farm system for a reason. It is a system. There's not one piece of that farm unit that can operate in isolation of itself, so we have to make sure we're giving them the best advice that goes across that whole gambit of product and information, and the licence to operate, the environmental regulations, the legislation that comes in through there. So you're actually giving them advice to grow the best forage, then complementing the feed, then making sure that you're managing the effluent and getting the best information to make the best decisions.
Ag Hub, how do you subscribe, or what do you have to do?
Well, if you're a shareholder to Balance Agri-Nutrients, you get free access to what we call My Ag Hub, and that's got a number of modules in there where you can store your farm maps. You can make sure you've got your fertiliser placement putting onto there. And do the basic things, but then there's a lot of other modules that are a subscription-based module. It's a little bit like your Sky TV. You buy the basic package, but in this case you get that free, and then all those other modules where you want to measure your moisture content, your weather, your you can even look and do your milk tracking. You can put your weight of your animals in there. You can use the audits. So all of those ones there is a fee-based subscription on top of your free Balance shareholder subscription.
And so it obviously is a lot more than just a factory on the main road south of Ashburton. After the break, we're talking law. Mainland Minerals have been giving farmers the edge since the 1950s. Sophisticated and very accurate soil tests and a vast knowledge of what the soil needs means those using Mainland Minerals get their costs extremely low while getting the very best results from their fertiliser. Fertiliser application is a science. Get it wrong and you pay. Get it right and it'll pay you dividends. Mainland Minerals, proven over 60 years and one of the best kept secrets in farming. Contact the award-winning guys and turn your property around. Airtech wastewater treatment systems are the future here now. Easy to use and efficient, these sewage plants are already where the environmentalists are heading. You can relax as new rules come into place. A series of chambers does the work while you reap the benefits. Easy to landscape, they're ideal for new homes or as a replacement for an old septic tank. Airtech wastewater treatment system, your advantage when dealing with grey or black water. See the RX Plastics website for details or contact RX Environmental.
Christchurch has its very own enchanted utopia, the Hitching Post. Pop in and see for yourself. A magical assortment of handmade creations, custom-made candles and artwork. Choose from our huge range of water features, garden art and imported giftware. Specialists in handcrafted metal artwork made in store. Nestled on 722 Marshlands Road, the Hitching Post, defining art our way.
Kaikoura, located just 2 hours out of Christchurch. Kaikoura's amazing natural environment is what makes it one of New Zealand's must-see destinations. And the Kaikoura community has recognised the value of their environment as they enter their 10th year of environmental certification in order to protect it. Environmental certification is a commitment by all residents and businesses to act sustainably through having a zero waste commitment, biodiversity, water use and protecting the ocean resources through a coastline strategy. To find out more, visit kaikoura.co.nz.
Avoid the monkeys when it comes to relocating. Trust A1 Movers, a family business since 1993 that guarantees a professional job every time. We carefully handle and wrap your valued items, ensuring they have a safe journey. Secure storage and insurance options are also available.
A1 Movers, the careful, caring, moving company.
Oi! Come on down to Ferrymead Golf. Care for a game of paintball? How about some swings on the old driving range? Or on our Par 3 9-hole golf course? Test your skills on the mini golf course or have a go at the airgun shooting range. Then relax at the Wow Cafe with one of our super succulent Wow Burgers. Whether you want to perfect your swing or are looking for a fun family day out, come down to Ferrymead Golf, 50 Ferrymead Park Drive, right next to the Ferrymead Heritage Park.
Welcome back to Rob's Country. Graham Harmon's a very old firm and you're staying in the suburbs in the meantime.
We are, Rob, and just on last weekend, in fact, we had a new fit-out delivered up to us in the building we occupy, which is a real boon for the firm and for its clients and the staff particularly.
You've got parking there.
We have parking, but yeah, as I say, that the staff had to put up with less than desirable circumstances for nearly 3.5 years, and so it's tremendously exciting for the firm, and as I say, we now have new reception and meeting rooms and things for clients, so along with the car parking, they're now in reasonably comfortable surroundings when they arrive. So,
exactly,
yeah.
But you've got overseas clients as well, so I mean nowadays I guess with computers you can have overseas people.
Oh, of course, and we have the technology for things like video conferences and things, Skypes and all of that sort of stuff, so yeah. Talking law, voidable transactions. Yeah, well, it's something of an esoteric name, but in fact it happens quite often and a source of real confusion for many people. And what I'm talking about here is where obviously even despite the recent economic growth, there's still the odd company collapsing, falling over, going into liquidation. Mainzeal, for example, a reasonably recent example of that. And often it's the case that, say, an agricultural contractor has been doing work for someone, ultimately gets paid, thinks they're excellent, might have taken a little bit of time to get that payment, but they get paid. They get paid eventually. And then the company later goes into liquidation, and a few months after that, suddenly agricultural contractor, Rob, you get a letter saying, well, you have to repay that sum you got paid, and they come along to me and say, how could this possibly be, Graham? It's so unjust. So I have to sort of tell them about some of the laws in the company legislation, and so the answer really is that the philosophy of New Zealand company law and other countries, for example Australia, is that all creditors, particularly unsecured creditors of a company, are treated equally when it fails. And so the thought there is, well, if you happen to be a so-called lucky creditor and get paid just before it fails, why should you get a preference over other creditors who weren't so lucky at around that time?
Yeah, I can imagine the confusion though, because you're saying, well, hang on, I got paid on this side of the thing falling over.
That's right. But in fact, the other side goes back some way, and in fact, liquidators can go back up to 2 years.
I was going to ask you that, 2 years.
2 years for payments that have been made, and claw those back. And what happens is, if they do successfully claw the payments back, they go into the pool for all unsecured creditors, and then get divvied up in accordance with the Act, and equally among the unsecured creditors.
So you get paid $1,000, nearly 2 years out. You have to pay that back, and you might get a few cents in the dollar.
That's quite possible, yes. And again, yeah, your reaction is exactly the sort of reaction most people have, but that don't understand the purpose of the legislation. But then if you're on the other side of the coin and you're one of those creditors who didn't quite get paid, then you're quite happy about the fact that the pool's been enlarged by these other payments coming back. So it's about perspective and where you sit in the whole thing.
There's nothing you can do about that. I mean, you can't sort of... There's nothing you can put in place to protect yourself either.
No, there isn't. I mean, obviously, if you have some inkling or knowledge that the company that is paying you is insolvent or is about to go under, you may well not refuse payment on that basis, but you must be aware that there is a risk that that payment might ultimately be clawed back. There are some tests that have to be met by the liquidator. Not every payment can be clawed back, even if it's within that 2-year period. It has to be shown that the company was in fact insolvent. What I mean by that is that it wasn't able to pay its debts as they fell due. And then they also have to show that the payment that you received meant that you got more towards satisfaction of your debt than you would otherwise have got in the liquidation. So there's a couple of tests there that have to be met.
Graham, there must be trigger things that people think of. So in other words, if you don't get paid by the 20th of the month, you start shifting in your seat rather uncomfortably, for example.
Yeah, that's often a sign, or if it's gone out for 60 days or 90 days, the signs are getting, the warning bells are starting to go. And sometimes you might even have made demand for payment of your debt. And so that can, and when the worst happens, indicate that perhaps you did have some knowledge that the company wasn't likely to succeed.
This is unsecured, so IRD and the bank are safe.
IRD is slightly different to a bank. A bank's normally secured with some sort of security over the asset. Might be the assets of the company, or it might be land owned by the company, or something along those lines. IRD have a preference for some of the tax that's been unpaid, and therefore they sit ahead of other unsecured creditors.
Yeah. So, but if the person who's gone insolvent or liquidation has paid IRD, that doesn't necessarily come back into the pool, I wouldn't have thought.
No, not normally because of that preference.
Yeah, exactly.
IRD sort of says, no, we're okay, thanks. Yeah.
Apart from trigger points, I mean, it must be very unsettling for people.
Yeah, it is, and as I say, it's hard to get to grips with just why they should be repaying that money, but there are ways around it in the sense of there are defences available. If they've had what's called a running account, and so the contractor's been typically supplying either goods or services, say, for some time and getting paid, and supplying some more and getting paid, and supplying some more and getting paid. then those running account transactions are lumped together as one, and then it looks, the court, if ultimately it's having to decide this, looks at whether there was a net advantage out of all those transactions to that creditor. So that's sort of a tricky little thing. The other thing is if you have didn't have knowledge of the insolvency of the company but received the payment in good faith, didn't have any belief that it might tip over subsequently, and you've altered your position in some way in reliance on getting that payment, and then there may be the court might well assist you there.
Thank you very much indeed. And so
You're
obviously you go and see somebody like Harmon's if you're in that situation.
It's a difficult area, yeah.
After the break, it's Federated Farmers with John Hartnell.
BioBrew probiotics are a safe and affordable way to improve animal health and farm profitability. Our products are independently tested for quality by Lincoln University and proven to work through independent trials. We're proud to let our product speak for itself and prove that it works on your farm before you buy. Call us today for your farm-sized free sample.
We all know the best thing you can do for your body is eat fresh foods in their natural state. The same applies to your skincare. Southern Skin provides a skincare range with fresh, locally sourced ingredients, plus natural preservatives and emulsifiers to produce the best nourishment for your skin to unleash your healthiest complexion. New Zealand olive and aloe skincare for young or old, men, women and children. There is a product in the Southern Skin range for you. southernskin.co.nz.
My son's helped me greatly with my independence now that I've got more mobility.
Mum, I've been looking into stand assist chairs from More Mobility. They recline back with a footrest, then when you want to get out of them, they stand you up. You can even sleep on them. More Mobility can bring one out for a free trial. There's even electric beds too. What do you think? For more range and more expert advice, see More Mobility, corner Clarence and Princess Streets off Blenheim Road.
What a difference more mobility makes.
Ready to go, mate? Flight leaves at 4:30.
Relax, mate. We'll park at Airpark Canterbury.
Airpark Canterbury, privately owned and operated with a free 24/7 shuttle service. Call 0800 Airpark or book online at airparkcanterbury.co.nz.
Missed a show or want to watch it again? CTV is fitting in with your lifestyle. Be in control with CTV On Demand. Check out our website and follow the links. ctv.co.nz.
Irrigation is the future for farming in New Zealand, but like any technology, you can't be expected to get the most out of it on your own. Hydro Services is the key to maximising your results. On-farm irrigation management, minimising drainage losses, minimising power usage and maximising efficiency. Soil moisture solutions, soil water holding capacity assessments, resource consent applications and on-farm workshops, all there in the one place. Hydro Services, your one-stop for irrigation management and soil moisture measurement solutions.
Action Removals, offering short or long-term storage facilities, full packing services, comprehensive rates, all fully insured and with 6 vehicle sizes to choose from. Earthquake repairs? Action Removals pack, move, store and return your valuable possessions stress-free. Action Removals, a family business that has been operating in Christchurch for over 10 years. Action Removals, your one-stop removal service on time, every time. 0800 222 526.
Back to the program. John Bees, you've got a conference coming up.
We have. We commence on Sunday the 22nd in the lovely town of Wanganui, and it's a milestone for our industry. It's the first time in, I think, since 2002 that the industry is coming together as one. So that's a really important thing for our industry to achieve, and I hope from that it'll build and we'll strengthen our position further.
You're looking at a unification, I would imagine.
Correct. And we face the same challenges that the red meat industry is currently facing, and if you read the latest media, you'll see that they've been told to basically sit down and get there together. And from our bees perspective, we're in the same situation. We're now at that point where I think the industry recognises the absolute need for a single unified voice and a structure that will lead our industry over the next 10 or 15 years.
Because you basically got two fairly sizable units, haven't you?
Well, the sizable units, while they're there, they're certainly not sizable in relation to the industry. We're now nearly 5,000 beekeepers in New Zealand, and I think the two industry bodies, we'd be lucky to, if you added them together, they'd probably only have 800 total. So we have a vast majority of the beekeeping industry who play no part in industry politics and industry standards. They tend to sit on the fence and take the benefit free of charge. So from my perspective, it's really important that we change that and that we see all of industry contributing to our future and to dealing with all the challenges that we face on a day-to-day basis.
But you've got a few.
We have a lot, that's right. There are a lot of challenges. Obviously, the new biosecurity program that's being promoted by government, GIA or Government Industry Agreements, affects all of the primary sector, including the bee industry, so it's something that we have to focus on. It's a pay-as-you-go principle now, so we'll be wanting to make sure that we get that right and have our say correctly at the negotiation table. And we've got many other challenges like any other primary sector. Getting our products into markets is getting harder, and you only have to look at China and all the challenges that we've faced as a primary sector over the last 12 to 24 months. The bee industry faces those same challenges with market access. I mean, the technology today to be able to scan your product and find something that they couldn't find 2 years ago is there, and it's getting stronger, so we need to be very proactive rather than reactive to how we handle these things.
And purity, I mean, we're looking at the Manuka situation.
Correct.
I mean, that's
yep.
mindful.
So we are right in the middle of that current discussion, and we're in the process of establishing recommended labelling guidelines for all Manuka product. We've been at that process now for quite some time, but we're coming towards the end of that. So I would expect in the next 30 to 60 days that MPI will come out with a guideline, and we'll be looking for all industry to respect that guideline and to follow that guideline so that our international markets have absolute confidence in our product.
What are you going to do to seduce that 4,200 non-members to come in and throw their weight and money behind you?
If I have my way, they'll get a commodity levy, and then they'll definitely want to have a say, won't they? Because if you pay, you want a say. And one way to fix that is to bring in a commodity levy for our industry, and that will encompass, I guess, all the commercial sector. Probably won't encompass those beekeepers with less than 50 hives or the little tiny backyard packer, but it will encompass all the commercial sector, including the packers, the exporters, the health products industry that's booming out of out of honey and out of Manuka now, and all those ancillary support services.
It's not a case of seduction, is it? It's a case of a hammer, really.
Really, it's about a hammer, yes. And I think we're at that point that, really the nail's got to be banged home.
Yeah, sure, because, as you said, otherwise it's just kind of drift on and go around
we just drift on. We're grossly underfunded. We can't do the research that we need, and we've got many challenges, as I said, in the market access area. We've started a lot of projects, but we're rapidly running out of money. Industry needs to step up to the plate now. They need to take a professional and a knowledgeable approach to how we're doing things. They need to get in behind what we're doing and make sure that we are on the front foot rather than the back foot all the time.
Very briefly, have you got the numbers to swing it?
It's the bee industry. Anything's possible, just like all other primary sectors, and we've seen levies come and go, etc. Our industry is no different, but I believe that there is a very strong push now to get ourselves better organised. We have to take responsibility, and this is the way to do it.
John, thank you very much indeed. Federated Farmers' phone number and others you want to jot down on your screen now. Kurt Williams, you've either been watching or you just missed Rob's Country, but I will be back at the same time next week. Until then, bye now.